Alrighty guys, so I'm not even gonna lie. This episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit in the Pathfinder playtest literally has been the most difficult to build. Never have I ever in my entire gaming career had to double back on myself, had to double check a rule, dance the dance that we've danced to fulfill this request. Mr. John Conch would like me to build the Lancer from Final Fantasy in the Pathfinder playtest. For those of us who don't know what that means, we're looking at an armored warrior with a spear that learns to attack from the air and use the abilities of dragons. So get ready, kids. It's gonna be one heck of a ride. If you're liking what you're seeing, remember to like and subscribe, ding that bell, so you stay caught up on all your Pathfinder 1st and 2nd edition content. Looks like we got new blogs coming out. At least if Jason Bullman's Twitter can be believed. In any case, this episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit was brought to you in part by the Black Dragon Disciple, and really I should call you guys that more. Why? Because the name's sweet. John Conch. Thank you so much for this challenge, frankly, my friend. To everyone who is not John Conch, who is listening, yes, I'm kind of talking to John on this one, because this is part of his patron rewards. In addition to this being a request by a patron, and frankly, if John had not requested this as a video, we'd still do it. It's gnarly. John is high enough up the patron list that he gets once a month from yours truly a free custom build. So, John, I hope I did well. Again, everyone else, let's hit it. So, before we go talking about the mechanics in the game, let's talk about some Final Fantasy real quick. Oh, by the way, follow this card right up here if you'd like to play an actual Dragoon from Final Fantasy at the tabletop without having to jump through 1d4,000 hoops to do so. The Dragoon is, by and large, a spear or lance-wielding martial character, usually in armor, that makes them look dragony. But they have this trademark ability that we're capturing here in the playtest, jump. What I mean by that is the Dragoon leaps into the air, avoiding attacks while being airborne, and then next turn-ish comes back down to do extra damage from falling on someone with a spear. Is there something to do that in the playtest explicitly? No, not quite, unfortunately. But I think we came pretty close, so let's jump right in on it, shall we? So, for our Ancestry today, we will be building a dwarf. There are a couple reasons for this, and I'm not gonna lie, there was a cleric archetype on this build for a little while. Part of the reason we were a dwarf was to get to that 16 wisdom to have access to our deity's domains a little quicker. No longer the case. We remain a dwarf because the buff to con and wiz is really nice. No other way to say it. We don't care about our charisma. We are literally going to roll through most of this game with none of it. The plus 10 racial hit points is really nice. And also, I kind of like the flavor. I'm not going to lie. So a dwarf it is. Our dwarf, of course, will be the unburdened dwarf. We don't want our armor slowing us down. Our chainmail gives us a speed reduction of 5 feet. Dwarf doesn't care. Very important for the build because the amount of speed we're moving will directly correlate to the amount of damage we can do. We'll take the warrior background because quick repair is really good in high-level play. It's one of the 2 skill feats that we're talking about. And John, the rest are up to you to pick. Since I'm GMing for this one, it's kind of difficult for me to tell you where your skills are going because I know where they should. And for our class, we're starting out as a Barbarian. There were like 5 classes, both discussed by John and I, and me digging through the rulebook that I thought we might be playing today. It's got to be the Barbarian for a couple reasons. With our warrior background, with being a Barbarian and a Dwarf, our starting ability scores look something along the lines of 18 Strength, 16 Con, 12 Dexterity, 10 Intelligence, 14 Wisdom, 8 Charisma. I'm now realizing that the Pathfinder playtest kind of makes stat arrays. Literally, that's just an array, 18, 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, that I'm sure a lot of us have used from jump. By level 20, after some items, which we'll talk about more later, we're looking at a strength of 24, dexterity of 16, constitution of 20, intelligence of 14, wisdom of 20, charisma of 10. Big Scary Marshal is the name of the game for this one. We want our con pretty high because resistance is a thing. We want our strength really high because we like to punch things. +3 is the cap for the armor we're taking, that being chainmail. We like our intelligence a little more than our charisma, considering I imagine we are the face of the party, and dumping wisdom is always a bad idea, especially considering our barbarian eventually becomes master at will. Treating successes as critical successes seems pretty good to feed that stat. Our barbarian's totem will in fact, as you probably guessed, be the dragon totem. Now, I'm real tempted because, reasons to choose the black dragon, but today, since we're playing a dwarf, let's choose one of the metallics. I like a line breath weapon much better than I like a cone breath weapon in the playtest, given the fact that we can turn our head and adjust a little bit, and it kind of functions awkwardly and ironically as our ranged attack while raging. Let's choose the brass dragon, shall we? Seems fun. A line of fire, burping out the Forge of Torog, except Torog has nothing to do with this. Moving forward, this character can never defy a brass dragon or let insults slide, and while it's raging, the conditional bonus to damage gained by raging could do fire damage, and if you do so, the damage is increased by 1. Pretty good out the gate at level 1 there, considering that +2 conditional bonus could become a +3 conditional bonus, and God forbid you fight something that's vulnerable to fire, which is more common than you'd think, especially against things like demons in high-level play. Or, if you need to burn a house down, there you go. Tap it with your weapon. Of course, this means our character will resist piercing and fire damage with raging resistance, which says that while raging, our con mod out of arrows and fire. Not bad. Now let's hit those class feats, shall we? At level 1, I don't think there's anything I like more than Sudden Charge. Though it will matter a little less as we level our somewhat pokey in the playtest speed of 20 feet, means it might take a sec to get up there, So, Sudden Charge, of course, as long as we're not wearing heavy armor, allows us to move up to, in our case, 40 feet, and if you get within 5 feet, you can make a melee strike. This gets better and better as our move speed increases, and truly it will. But we're not worried about that right now. At level 2, to go ahead and get it out of the way, and because I think an optimized character, though I have seen John's Barbarian in Doomsday Dawn do some mean stuff with reactions, should probably have a shield, it being the ring of protection of the playtest, and because, frankly, there's a certain spear that is just necessary for how weird rage works. It's a fighter dedication. This, of course, giving us the attack of opportunity reaction once a day. May never use it, though. We'll see. And the access to the sweet, sweet fighter feats. Anyway, at 4th level, fast movement, which says that while we're raging, we're accelerated 10, is pretty good for this build, if for no other reason than now we're moving faster than the human while raging. Sudden charging out to 60, but more on why we're taking this as we level. Anyway, at level 6, it's Dragon Totem Breath. Once per hour, for 2 actions, in a 60-foot line, everyone's attempting a reflex save over your class DC, which is strength-based. Neato. Look how strong I breathe, everyone. Fire everywhere. To, start passing out a d6 per barbarian level amount of damage. We eventually will be spending a lot of time up, and away. On this character, I worry the cone may sometimes not quite be in range. In any case, we'll take, at level 8, borrowing from that fighter, Reactive Shield, which allows us to, as a reaction, raise our shield if we get attacked and we didn't have that 3rd action to raise the thing. The +2 to AC sometimes is the difference between a hit and a miss, sometimes it's the difference between a crit and a hit. Again, the shield is the ring of protection of the playtest. I cannot stop advocating for its use. Could literally save your life if the RNG starts hazing you. Moving forward at level 10, a big theme of this build is survivability. Renewed Vigor, letting us get temp HP for 1 action, whilst raging equal to half our level plus our con looks real good, especially in long, knockout, drag-out fights where the temporary HP of the Barbarian, as it does, will go up and down a lot. Now at level 12, Dragon Totem Wings is where we start to open up a little bit. Dragon Totem Wings says, while we are raging, we'll gain a fly speed of 40 feet, which helps fulfill the jump ability. These wings will only last as long as we rage. Now, the notion of the playtest Barbarian, and I really hope this gets cleaned up when we go to 2nd edition, is your rage might last a round, it might last 1,000,000 rounds. It depends on RNG. That said, Jumping requires us to fall. I strongly considered a Draconic Sorcerer in this spot. The reason the Draconic Sorcerer does not work is because the Dragon Wings power says that when your wings go bye-bye, you get a free feather fall. The Barbarian doesn't. The Barbarian will, fall on their face. For a lot of builds, this looks super scary. For our build, we aim to weaponize it. Going to talk about that in just a second because it's not online until 16th fully. So moving forward, at 14th, Quick Shield Block gives us an extra reaction, which we can only use to block with our shield. Used to be we had a Cleric dedication on this. I ended up not choosing it because I don't want to get that far from Lucky Halfling being a dwarf. So Quick Shield Block gives us 2 reactions with our shield to keep damage off us. Though, of course, the Cleric could renew... Though, of course, the Might Cleric can eat it twice, as we've discussed in an earlier video, where we were casting Greatsword. Follow this card right up here, and we'll tell you more about it. Anywho, it's Perfect Clarity at level 16. I do not like this feat. I do not like this feat at all. There is no way to choose when your rage ends. How ironic is the position that we find ourselves in now. I have complained for so long about how bad the rage mechanic is because it can't be controlled and could end in 1 round. This time, it's from a different angle because we need to control exactly when the rage ends, because when our rage ends, our wings go away and we fall. Perfect Clarity allows us to do so. Perfect Clarity as a reaction. When you fail or critically fail an attack roll or will save whilst raging, you can re-roll, taking the better result of course, then you stop raging. Now by level 16, we also have access to a couple of other toys. Other than Quick Repair and its legendary ability to buff the dent out of a shield in 1 action, the only other skill feat we're talking about today is Catfall. One who is legendary in acrobatics always lands on their feet and takes no fall damage regardless of the distance of the fall, which, could save your life as a barbarian who cannot control when those wings go away. If you had to jump off a cliff to chase a thing in the Pathfinder playtest, they might last a round. You might get just over the chasm and then fall 200 feet and die a horrible death. Not this time, because with Catfall, you'll always land on your feet taking no damage. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that what we land on won't take that damage. Now, this is a bit of a flavor stretch, and since I'm GMing for this character, John, it works. I don't know how, you get to flavor it. If you land on a creature, that creature must attempt a DC 15 reflex save. On a success, it takes bludgeoning damage equal to 1/4 of the falling damage you took. On a crit success, it takes no damage. On a failure, it takes bludgeoning damage equal to 1/2. And on a critical failure, it takes the same amount of falling damage. Now, I could see the devs coming back on this one and saying, if you took no damage, they took no damage. But this is probably the only way in the Pathfinder playtest to be able to capture the Lancer's jump. Catfall seems to protect you. One can read this as, you took no damage, so they take no damage. I think it's more than fair to say the Catfall protects you while harming them. So, to talk about our choice of weapon really quickly, because it kind of had to be, as we already discussed, you guys know, we were limited in our choice of weapon this time to some kind of polearm. I'm going to cheat that a little. I'm going to choose something from the spear group, specifically a trident. The trident is a thrown weapon. We can attack from the air with it. This also frees up a hand to use a shield. The glaive looked really good, was almost our choice, but we need something to attack from range, and Perfect Clarity is why. Flying upwards is difficult terrain, which means, it counts as half movement unless you grab those Boots of Elvenkind, which lets you ignore difficult terrain, at least when you activate them until the end of your turn, so you fly up 100 feet. And isn't it just so convenient that our fly speed, accelerated 10, happens to be 50? That's literally 1 action fly up, after using a free focus activation to ignore difficult terrain, action the second, fly up again. We stop at 100 because that puts us at our maximum range, 5 range increments out from the trident's range of 20 feet. Attack with your trident, your dex is not good. You're at your last range increment, you're taking an enormous penalty you are almost destined to miss. Rules as written, fumbling that strike does nothing bad. This is where we use our perfect clarity reaction. Doesn't matter if we hit, and if we crit them, hey, that's hilarious. Basically, we're just trying to force our rage to end. Out of combat, you may be able to fly way higher, and I definitely can see the value of a huge creature flying way too high in the air in a, wartime setting, landing, occupying too many squares on, a troop of soldiers with catfall and oping them all to death, because they'll definitely fail their saves, probably. Anywho, after we end our rage, we fall. We're just fine. Other than that gross fatigue condition, we land on somebody, and it's a reflex save or they're taking damage. Again, I'm kind of specifically speaking to John on this one. Sure, things are going to pass that save in our game. We're playing it at 20th. If you can talk someone else in the squad to playing some kind of caster, the asleep condition does indeed say that you critically fail all reflex saves you must attempt. Is this 100% foolproof? No. But if someone in your squad, John, or the squad of any party out there causes someone to fall asleep before you fall on them, that could be 100 damage thrown out. Even if you don't want a catfall on this build, with the amount of temp HP that we can throw around and maybe invest in a healer for this amount of shenanigans, that probably wrecks somebody, or at least a lot of their hit points. To say nothing of post-level 17, when you're not fatigued after a rage, fall on someone out of combat to start the combat, or maybe you were flying for a couple rounds and then land on them, then rage and continue to wail on their faces or fly up and set up again. Anyway, 2 more feats. Now, at feat level 18, there's a lot of choices we could take, but I feel it would be wrong to not take Dragon Transformation. For 1 action, this will transform us into a large form of dragon, matching our dragon totem. So, snap our fingers, we're a brass dragon, basically. Of course, we have to have enough space and stuff. Now, in combat, our trident is a d8. We'll have a shield. There's no reason, especially considering we're not trying to do some weird agile stuff, for our heavy steel shields boss to not swing in, for that d6. But becoming a brass dragon gives us, in addition to a 20-foot burrow speed, jaws that'll do 2d8 points of piercing plus 2d4 in fire, claws with the agile trait, awkwardly enough, don't use that, even though they do more damage, because raging will mean the math comes out worse for us. Probably rather just give him that tail slap for 2d10. Again, this is mostly here just to shore up our abilities in combat and for flavor, but I think the flavor's super good. But there's one feat that beats it in terms of flavor, the Barbarian's Capstone. Probably the meanest capstone feat I've seen so far. We're rolling in at 20th level with the disgustingness that is Quaking Stomp. Once per minute for 1 action, you shake the ground, toppling creatures and shattering things in a 60-foot aura around you mechanically. All squares in that area become difficult terrain. Attack rolls and skill checks by creatures on the ground take a -2 circumstance penalty. Ope will just fly up 5 feet and cease to care. Any creature on the ground must attempt a reflex save at the start of its turn, or it could fall into a 40-foot fissure, taking 20 points of bludgeoning damage and needing a DC 15 athletics check to climb out. This also can wreck a lot of structures and ceilings, it being a flat check, DC 16 for something that's sturdy, 14 for an average thing, and natural formations and stuff, 9 for a shoddy structure, and anything caught in that collapse catches 11d6 bludgeoning damage to the dome, and then has to make a reflex save to escape. They might fall prone, they might take full collapse damage, and then fall into a fissure. Also, there's a lot of shenanigans going on here that GMs, hey, that's me, get to homebrew around. And that is how we capture the Lancer. It's a little wonky, yeah, it's a little convoluted, sure. But hey, what's a game that's not convoluted and wonky, right? Anywho, we're gonna buzz on them real. Stone Cunning, then Stone Walker at 1st and 17th will help our dwarfy boy find things in stonework in the form of a +2 circumstance bonus to perception, which sometimes can roll over secret things, and then eventually let you cast Meld into Stone as an innate spell once per day to, set up that ambush or meld into the ceiling and then drop on someone after for all the shenanigans. Lucky Halfling, its bigger brother, Guiding Luck are staples in the playtest. Do not fumble your saves in the clutch, this will help you, and Mountain's Stoutness for the dwarf, essentially, is a double toughness. As for those general feats, From Jump will be adopted by halflings. At 7th level, shield proficiency is a level before our first shield feat, because again, especially at higher level play, don't get eaten. It's important. Taking damage is not good for our health, and since we're going to be fatigued sometimes for quite a while, the ability to raise our AC, also while we're raging and taking a debuff to our AC, and mitigate some damage, can save you from being crit to death in the fatigue round. Lightning reflexes at level 11 to shore up the one thing we aren't starting at expert in, perception and saves wise. Then toughness and die hard to really stack in with our too much con, and our mountain stoutness to, make sure we're super buff. Couple of quick item shoutouts real fast before we call it a day here. We've already talked about the fact that we're using a trident. The returning rune will ensure, after our shenanigans, this thing returns to our hand, doesn't fall to the ground and break horribly. Seems like a necessary staple to me. Of course, our chainmail will be enchanted all the way up to +5. Same with that trident. 2 more items we'll talk about today, though. First, it's the Forge Warden. The Forge Warden gives you fire resistance, which we don't care about. Our friends get fire resistance, which we may care about. But whenever this shield takes a dent, the adjacent attacking creature, if you choose to activate your shield, takes 4d6 fire damage. And then with Quick Repair, saying that at Legendary Crafting, you just op it back to full for an action, makes that I spent 1 action to raise my shield thing a little less painful. Also, I really want to build a Paladin of Torog now to really, really abuse that, but neither here nor there. Finally, the Belt of Giant Strength is a potent item, which means we can only be invested in it, not all the other Big Six-esque items from back in the day. This is what helps us get our strength as high as we did. Buffing out that damage when you're falling on someone and then wailing on them. Seems a little too good for me to pass up, but that's all we have to say. What do you guys have to say about this build? Catfall plus falling damage on the bad guy? Is that an oversight on Paizo's part? Would you allow it? And what other Final Fantasy-esque characters can we get up to here in this Pathfinder playtest? Throw them in the comments. Thank you guys so much for watching. Next week's episode of Min-Maxing for Fun and Profit is yet another Black Dragon Disciple request. Not for that classic prestige class though, no. This time we're looking into the Mystic Theurge. I'll see you next Saturday.